wherever you are. We're really excited to welcome you today to this webinar where we are keen to explore taking a systems approach to looking at early childhood in humanitarian settings. My name is Shek Rufai. I'm the Global Technical Lead with the Early Childhood Development Action Network. And it's my pleasure to be co-organizing this webinar today with the Moving Minds Alliance, INEE, as well as Sesame Workshop and BRAC. So today, just a few housekeeping things before we get started. For Q&A, please put your questions in the Q&A box so we don't lose them. Please use the chat to introduce yourself, share resources, talk to each other. We welcome that. So with that, we'll get started today. Apologies. Apologies for that. So we'll get started today with our first presentation of the day. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our colleagues from the Moving Minds Alliance. We have Tricia Young, who is the Executive Director, and Noor, who is a Senior Engagement and Advocacy Manager with the Moving Minds Alliance. So over to Noor and Tricia. Tricia, you're on mute.
Okay, hopefully everybody can see my slides and I'm now unmuted. It's wonderful to see so many people join us from all over the world today. And I'm delighted to be here. My name's Tricia Young and I'm the director of the Moving Minds Alliance. I've been at the Alliance since last October. And for those of you that don't know us, we are a multi-stakeholder global advocacy impact network focused on early childhood development in emergencies. We all know that humanitarian crises are escalating and that the numbers of children are increasingly infected. In 2022, it was estimated that as many as 1 in 4 children in the world was directly affected by some form of crisis. We also know that holistic and integrated nurturing care can help to mitigate the multiple significant long and short-term impacts of crises on children. We know that delivery of life-saving interventions is incomplete without explicit support for key aspects of early childhood development. And these include play-based approaches to enable quality early learning, alongside targeted support for caregivers, including mental health and psychosocial support. We need to integrate these interventions into existing services to ensure that young children and those who care for them can receive the support they need to promote optimal development and well-being. In 2017, the Moving Minds Alliance was established by a group of philanthropic foundations who were united around a concern that these youngest children affected by crisis and displacement were not getting this type of support and were not being enabled to rebuild their resilience and achieve their full potential. Our original vision was that families caught up in crisis should have access to the resources they need to rebuild resilience and foster the well-being and development of their youngest children. You can see that our original advocacy strategy focused on increasing financing, policies, and leadership in support of this agenda. Today, the Moving Minds Alliance is a multi-stakeholder impact network, bringing together a range of partners, including all of those here today on the call, providing that combine programmatic funding and research expertise, who are collaborating to support prioritization of the youngest refugees and their caregivers. Members work collaboratively towards a range of key objectives in working groups which they lead. But despite the concerted efforts of the members, in late 2022, it became apparent that the Moving Minds Alliance was not achieving the changes it sought in the humanitarian system, and that we weren't getting the traction that we wanted to increase prioritization of the issues affecting young children affected by crisis and displacement. So the leadership team decided to commission an analysis of the humanitarian system to better understand the barriers and constraints. Systems mapping enables us to gain greater clarity around the issues. And so we commissioned an organisation called Reimagine Futures to complete this analysis to enable us to better understand what the barriers and constraints were for us achieving the changes we sought to achieve. Noor, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Trisha. I'll just share my screen. Are you all seeing my screen?
Yep, but
okay.
not the full screen.
Yeah. Great. Okay, thank you everyone for having me. As we mentioned, my name is Noor and I'm the Senior Engagement and Advocacy Manager at the Moving Minds Alliance. And why I'm presenting basically this map today is I was one of the main core team in MMA last year who worked on the humanitarian systems map. And why I was on the main team because in addition to my role at MMA, I've also worked in humanitarian and refugee responses for the last 10 years. I'm also a Syrian refugee expert myself. And that's why I was one of the 5 people who worked on this with the consultants. And today I'm going to present a bit about the humanitarian systems map. It was built across 5 months. And it's used desk research and field research led by the main core team and consultants with tens of interviews with experts across advocacy, early childhood development and emergencies, humanitarian coordination and funding. We've also done 3 country workshops with local actors and INGOs working in those countries. In Bangladesh, Uganda, and Poland. We've also done a focus group discussion and an intensive workshop with refugee caregivers in Jordan and included multiple MMA members and partners into different workshops. And the questions we asked ourselves to create the systems map: what are the factors that influence the humanitarian system's ability to provide the crisis-affected people, particularly children and caregivers, with the power, resources to meet their self-identified needs in an environment of dignity, equity, and care? And we did this to understand how MMA can support the caregivers and children in crisis better. We know that we need to understand how to support the systems of ECD in emergencies, but in order to do that, we need to understand in a more impactful and deeper way the humanitarian system that affects it, and also the root that the humanitarian system stems from, right? And that helped us identify a deep structure. And with that deep structure, we were able to study the effects on it, on the relevance of humanitarian aid, the concentration of power, the improvements and opportunities in the system, the short-term cycles of humanitarian crisis, which all poured back into the early childhood development system in crisis and affected directly the children and caregivers. So I'm going to go a bit to the deep structure. I'll try to explain it. So it shows from the research, from the 5 months work that we've done, it shows that the humanitarian system actually stems from colonial legacies. So you can see coloniality as the center of the deep structure. And here we're talking about coloniality that refers to the enduring legacies of colonialism in social, economic, cultural, and political system, even after the formal end of colonial rule. It is the set of relations and structures of power that emerge from colonialism and shape the way societies and individuals are organized and interact with each other, and how internal biases and assumptions come into play when it comes to funding, systems, trust relationships, whose knowledge is more valuable, whose technology is more advanced, etc. And how does coloniality, you would think, affect early childhood development systems? So as you can see here in the 2 big loops, the coloniality actually supports increased saviorist mindset. So when we have more power historically, we want to rescue or fix some certain people, we need that they would need our help, etc., which created that we need to act now. So it created that kind of short-term reaction to certain humanitarian crises. So it created that supply-driven short-term humanitarian aid, which decrease the funding and the support for recovery and resilience, systematic support. So instead of just like dealing with the symptoms, we needed to deal with the root causes of these humanitarian crises, which, because there isn't like enough money for building those systems and infrastructure for the community affected people to deal with their crisis on their own, if anything like this occurs again, it actually kept them dependent and needing for short-term international aid cycles. And being dependent on that actually takes away from their own autonomy and agency to deal with their crisis in the way they needed and prioritize their own needs, and took away the power for them to use the resources in the international system. So that's the first kind of big circle. The second circle here with the loops, it shows how coloniality actually historically privileged UN agencies and big NGOs, and it creates this huge power imbalance on who makes the decision, who uses the fund, who the funds goes to, and how does that trickle down to the community? How does it affect children and caregivers, right? So it goes to show that the power imbalance here is decreasing in the UN agencies and NGOs, is decreasing localized action and localized autonomy for them to take the leadership of funding, of resources, of creating their own designed ECD interventions. And that decreased localization, again, decreases the autonomy and the engagement and leadership of the people, including caregivers and children. So this shows you just a bit about the deep structure of the humanitarian system. And okay, so now we've kind of like talked about the problems, and this is some of the problems. This is only the deep structure. I really encourage you all to see all of the other kind of systems that stem from that. And here, so we identified the problems, and we know that we want to reach the guiding star. We want to reach the goal when we have a humanitarian system that provides all children and their caregivers in situations of crisis the power and the resources to address their self-identified needs in an environment of dignity, equity, and care. So we needed to identify what will take us there. This is what is called in system thinking leverage points. And leverage points is what is a small, modest intervention that results in huge radical change in the system along the time, and that has ripple effects across all of the systems. And here, based on the analysis, the team, the core team and the members work to identify the potential leverage points. And you can see we identified where the system is frozen. So here what we mean is like things that is really hard to change, like colonial history and legacies, or like laws and like international laws. Like these are things that neither MMA or like an individual organization will be able to change. And where are the places that seem like a mixed bag, something that can go really good or really wrong, right? Where are the places that seem like bright spots, low-hanging fruit? Where can we directly do something? Where are you seeing ripple effects? Where are things that we can do that will actually do like a huge change into the system? So based on that analysis, we came together to identify that. And as you see here, according to the Donella Meadows leverage points theory, you can see here the maximum change in the system actually is the power to shift the mindset, right? But as I explained, it's really hard to shift like historical colonial legacies and like different mindset, etc. But at the same time, what we have been as international actors, we've been focusing on is on the other side, which is constants, parameters, numbers. So we're focusing on quantities, like we're advocating for more funding for ECD or more reach for children in ECD, which or more better coordination, etc., which is really important. But as you can see here, it does not have that impactful change in the system, right? So the leverage points we've identified with our teams and our members actually have mid to high kind of impact and mid-change in the system. And here, the workshop identified specific strategic actions that we can take in the system that are not too hard to change, and also, but not to that like have less impact, as I mentioned. So, but something that has the ripple effects to balance the power between the humanitarian actors and affected populations and caregivers and children, that generates more sustainable positive impact for them through the support of locally led ECD solutions and coordination and preparedness. And that all of that analysis took us to our theory of change right now in MMA. So in response to this analysis, and after 3 full days meeting with MMA members and partners last year, we analyzed the map, we came up with the leverage points identified, and we started with the strategic action and identified this leverage hypotheses that show which interventions should be prioritized by MMA to support the realization of our mission, and how can we best support the caregivers and children in crisis. And from those strategic actions, we built upon the strategic advocacy that we shared before. So it's not like something, we're not reinventing the wheel, we're actually building on that. But instead of like focusing only on breadth, we also focused on depth. So instead of working on top level, being target-led, trying to influence funders, we realized that we also need to be people-led. And instead of advocating for more financing for ECD, we started advocating for more financing for ECD local solutions, for ECD flexible and sustainable funding. Because when it's led by local and refugee actors who are embedded within the affected community, they understand them the most. They are able to bring more sustainable and longer impact. And additionally, while we have been working on enhancing the humanitarian cluster system for many years, we are also now investing in creating alternative child-centered models. And finally, when we are working on a country level to support ECD, we are also prioritizing regional and local level ECD advocacy and ensuring that local and refugee experts are present on the decision-making tables, starting from MMA and beyond. And the change is like needs to start from within us and within our own organization. We cannot advocate for inclusion of local experts if that doesn't happen from us. And we cannot hold stakeholders accountable if we don't hold ourselves accountable. And we're not able to serve the children and caregivers if they are not front and center in everything that we're doing. And we model all of the funding, the policy, the coordination around them, not the other way around. So now that we've shared all of this, how can you use the systems map in your organization, in your context? So first of all, you need to organize a core team like we did. So up to kind of 5 people of different expertise. And you should, if I'm allowed to say, you must have experts with lived experience, because we're able to bring in what realistically happen in crisis to theoretically what systems look like, and we bring that to life. And then you're able to identify your guiding star. So what is the problems in your context? Where do you want to go? Then define once you define also the type of your organization. So are you a funder, a local organization, or INGO? Check on use our system. Don't start from scratch. Use our systems map, define where you are, what loops you link to, what power you hold, how are you linked to the affected community, how are you linked to other actors, and then amend that. So add more loops, delete more loops, delete actors, add actors and barriers and enablers that are according to your context and your crisis. And the last one is creating spaces for feedbacks, multiple feedbacks. We've done 20 iterations of this systems map, right? So multiple feedbacks with your stakeholders, with people who are affected. So the community affected and the stakeholders who are involved in your context. And yeah, I'm done. I hope that was helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Noor and Trisha, for the presentation. And to follow up on that, I think we wanted, Ekdan did use the map that MMA had created to explore its applications within a particular context, which was Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. And we just want to present a few lessons and takeaways from that particular workshop and some ways in which we found that the map could be used in different contexts. So this essentially builds on the earlier presentation to share a specific example of how the map has been used to help improve collaborative efficiency. So I'm just going to pull my screen up with the presentation and take you through it. 1 second. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Shreya. I currently work with EGDAN, and I'm excited to be here to share some lessons and takeaways from a case that really explored how systems thinking could be used to enhance collaborative efficiency and effectiveness within the early childhood development in emergencies ecosystem in Cox's Bazar. And it really builds on the map that Trisha and Noor just presented as a tool through the process. So to provide some background, this essentially is a part of the Systems Thinking for ECD initiative, which is a collaboration to explore how we can integrate ideas from systems thinking and systems thinking approaches within early childhood development. And within this initiative, we have 4 different pillars of work, which includes system research, systems investing, systems measurement, and systems design and implementation, and is underpinned by a lot of learning and knowledge exchange, as well as communication and advocacy. And this particular case and this particular work that we did falls under our systems design and implementation pillar. So the primary guiding question behind the case and the workshop itself was to see whether there's potential for enhancing collaborative effectiveness within the ECD ecosystem in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh to improve outcomes for children through systems thinking. And to set some context, the Cox's Bazar currently houses close to 1 million refugees in the Rohingya community. And of this, 16% of them are children. And within this context, there are close to 20 different working groups coordinated by various agencies that directly or indirectly indirectly impact children and their families. And this essentially creates a complex environment with multiple policies, norms, and practices, which is why systems thinking could potentially be an effective tool to improve quality of services and quality support provided to children and their families. So with this in mind, we essentially, in collaboration with BRAC, hosted a workshop on systems thinking to understand or explore how systems thinking could be applied to improve support for children and their families within such a complex context. And the workshop had participants from across 15 organizations within the ECDIE ecosystem in Cox's Bazar, and primarily included members of the Early Childhood Development Working Group, some of whom you'll hear from later in today's webinar. Now, to ensure that the workshop was designed and was designed to be responsive to the context, we first conducted a pre-survey with the participants to understand the current knowledge and understanding of systems thinking. And with that, during the workshop, we really explored the concept of systems thinking, how it can be useful in complex environments, and also heard from some keynote speakers on some examples of how systems thinking can be used in practice across a few other contexts. We also used a systems thinking tool. In this case, was the Humanitarian ECD systems map that we just saw developed by the Moving Minds Alliance and built on the work that they had done. And post the workshop, we also conducted a post-workshop survey and also did some follow-up interviews to hear participants' reflections and identify potential next steps to really integrate better systems thinking practices within this context. Talking about the workshop itself, which was the core of what we did and the case is based on, the key objectives of the workshop was really to bring together a diverse group of stakeholders from the ECDI ecosystem. It was to explore the potential of systems thinking in this context, and also specifically explore the map and specific thematic areas in the map and how which of these might be dominant or resonate with people within the context. And through this process, we found that participants were able to identify a range of different systemic barriers that currently prevented them from addressing various known challenges within the community. So this included things like lack of coordination amongst the various sectors involved, reduced funding, which seemed to be a continued problem, cultural barriers in engaging with the community, power imbalances, and also the lack of actively involving the community and their voice in various decisions and design and strategies that were used in the context. To think about how some of this could be addressed, the participants were introduced to the systems map as a tool to facilitate collaborative action. And they found that the map really helped provide a big picture overview within which a lot of their work was embedded and allowed them to visualize the various complexities of the challenges from a bird's eye level. They were also able to explore the various dynamics that was represented in the map and identify which ones were more dominant within their specific context and how some of that could be addressed. So taking from that, a few of the things from the map that participants seemed to really resonate and agreed with were primarily various elements in the deep structure that Noor just presented. And this included the facts about the colonial roots of power imbalances in the system, and also the challenge of short-term supply-driven aid, which prevented a lot of meaningful systemic interventions on the ground. Looking at the map, they were also able to identify specific areas which were important but not so developed within the Bangladeshi context. So this included the need for better advocacy material and efforts. They were also able to identify the need to better engage and include voices of the local community in the work that they did. And finally, they also found some sections of the map that were not very dominant in their context and also had suggestions on some changes they could make to this global map to make it more reflective of the context in Cox's Bazar. And this included identifying and acknowledging various cultural differences, beliefs, and customs of the community and how that could really improve the application of the map within their specific context. Through the exercise, some observations and learnings that we had was how the systems map was a great tool to really help participants reflect on their context and identify the various existing feedback loops and their consequences and how they could address some of these. The map also really helped provide a great visual of the complexity of the system, which for the first time many participants were looking at. But given the complexity, we also found that it could be overwhelming initially, and there was some resistance to engage with it. And what really helped do that was really some guided facilitation to take them to sections of the map. And once they were able to go through the map section by section, they were able to engage with it more meaningfully. We also found and also heard that a similar activity with a more contextualized map really reflected the local context, and more time to really engage with the map would have had additive benefits to re-explore the various nuances and think about different ways in which they could address some of the various points of leverage within the map itself. And finally, some key reflections that we heard from participants through the course of the survey and the interviews we conducted was that the map really helped provide a useful overview of the current dynamics and also allow them to reflect on certain areas of improvement or certain things that they could do. And some key themes that emerged here was one, certain specific areas of improvement. This included identifying that currently a lot of agencies and sectors work in isolation, and there was scope for better collaboration amongst various stakeholders involved in the ecosystem. They also identified opportunities for engaging the community a whole lot more and building community leadership in the work that they did, and also how there could be more efficient use of time and resources. Participants also identified various practical application systems thinking. So this included supporting joint program design, how systems thinking could help duplication of efforts, how it could help develop more well-rounded strategies and work plans. And they were also able to identify very specific areas and issues in which systems thinking could be really helpful, such as addressing food security issues within the camps or addressing recruitment of teachers and similar things where the systemic approach could really help develop more well-rounded solutions. And finally, they also identified some areas of broad application. So this included improving mechanisms of accountability, as well as engaging the community a whole lot more in program design and delivery. Finally, some suggested, I think in conclusion, there was general agreement about the usefulness of the map and usefulness of systems thinking. But the feedback was really to invest more time in contextualizing the map and supporting more ongoing processes to use the map in day-to-day in their work instead of just one-off workshops to really help build more capacity in the system and really to help them have more nuanced exploration to use it and apply it more in their day-to-day work. We'll be sharing a link to the case study in the chat box soon, as well as share it in our post-Zoom email for you to explore it and go through many more details, which we've not covered in the presentation itself. And with that, I'm going to stop and pass it on to Emily from Sesame Workshop, who's going to speak a little more about some of the work they've been doing in supporting coordination within the context. So over to you, Emily.
Thank you, Shreya, and everyone who's spoken before. For those I haven't had the opportunity to meet, my name is Emily Guerin, and I am the lead for advocacy at Sesame Workshop based in New York. And I have the good fortune of working with a team in a number of different contexts. And really looking at some of this work in how it manifests in different ways in different contexts around the world. So we've heard from the Moving Minds team and from Shreya, some sort of starting at the biggest global systems thinking, and then taking it down to Cox's Bazar. And then the work that we did was really taking one particular loop of that system that we looked at and digging into how we could make change very concretely within that one loop that was related to the coordination of humanitarian support. So I'm going to share now, which hopefully you all will be able to see, and talk with you a little bit more about the specific work that we did and really turning the coordination study that we did into a practical resource for others in different contexts to be able to learn from the systems approach that we took here. So let me start with a little bit of context in explaining, for those who are not familiar with the formal UN humanitarian system, which, as Noor has pointed out, has a tremendous number of problems. One of which is a challenge around coordinating multi-sectoral topics like early childhood development. There's a long established history of pretty functional programming in some ways on single vertical topics like water and sanitation, like health, like shelter. But there's a really big struggle in coordinating when issues or populations cross all of those boundaries and need to be considered holistically as children and families are holistic human beings rather than sectors. So we wanted to start, excuse me, I'm having trouble advancing my. There we go. We wanted to start learning about what good practice was out there in addressing some of these challenges around coordination. And when we started out, we had some challenges. So we ended up creating a coordinator cohort. And this presentation is going to take us through why we created this, really who the participants were, what we learned, and we'll share some of the resources that we had. So the reason that we ended up creating a new approach to dealing with coordination on early childhood is because we wanted to start from the existing structures that were out there and learn the lessons of what other contexts have been working on, how it had worked well, how it had not worked. But as we got out, working with our colleagues at the University of Virginia, into looking at some of those models, we realized there weren't really models that anybody was particularly happy with, including the folks who were implementing them in coordination cohort, or rather in coordination functions around the world. So there wasn't, a nice, neat set of case studies that we could take and share with others and suggest replication and adaptation. There just really wasn't a good basis of evidence. So what we decided to do was take folks who were doing coordination directly in crises around the world and ask them about their experience, learn from what they were doing, learn the challenges they were having, have them share information with each other, ask and answer each other's questions. And we sort of sat back and listened to all of the insights and helped to document and learn them. But really, it was about gathering that collective knowledge from folks who were doing the work in particular. So those folks came from a number of different contexts around the world. We did our best to diversify the geographies and keep the cohort pretty small and focus really on that internal communication between the teams to see if there were systemic answers to some of the systemic challenges that we were seeing. And you can see here some of the geographies where we engaged different coordinators, some of whom are on the call today. And what we learned, I'll go through here a couple of pieces and you'll be able to see the presentation later. But really what we learned is that a lot of the challenges of the systems required systems-based responses. So you'll see this in the kind of overarching lessons that we have here. The first one was very clearly that you do need some sort of coordination mechanism, that these challenges that recur in context after context require a more formal structure to meet the expectations and realities of an existing structure and to function within it. And these are some of the quick tips around how to engage in establishing a coordination mechanism like this. And then the second piece of it is similarly kind of building into the systemic way that other entities and topics engage with that larger funding world, and that is really making sure that the needs of young children and caregivers, the interests and appetites of communities were reflected from the very beginning. The way that we think about this is, there's so much talk about increasing funding on the back end, but there are several steps that have to happen before that. The most important of which is really identifying through community engagement what those needs are and what the desires are of the community to actually meet the needs. So if they're not embedded in the needs assessments from the very beginning, it's incredibly difficult to get them later. So the first step is really making sure that they're in the assessments and then that they're in the plans, and then they can get into the appeals for the funding later. And I think this is one of the most important pieces of it when it comes to the impacts on individual children and families, which is really doing what we can to program more holistically, more in a more human-centered way that recognizes that we aren't just patients or students or workers, but we're human beings that integrate and receive and need to receive all of these services and engage in these systems holistically, not divided. In ECD is a really good example of how we can do this effectively. And I think that it can serve as a really great example to other multi-sectoral topics that are trying to address these in a more human and humane way. Finally, we do have to make sure that we're keeping track of all of these pieces and that there is the change that not we as humanitarians want to see in the world, but that the changes that communities have identified for themselves are actually happening, and that we have feedback within those systems to identify whether the communities think it's happening and happening, in a way that is appropriate for their expectations and their needs as well. And then obviously there's the portion of continuing to do the advocacy around well-coordinated early childhood development. And that advocacy needs to happen both with host governments, with donor agencies and multilateral donors, and with all of the entities that are actually implementing programming who need to be consulting communities and helping to break some of these other cycles that we heard earlier from Noor. So all of this work has been, documented, and we're really grateful to the members of the cohort who've helped us to develop all of these resources over the past 2 years. And you can find them all here. That hyperlink at the top, when you see the PowerPoint, will lead you to all of these other resources. But this is all extremely hypothetical, and I'm really, really excited to be able to move to the next part of the conversation, where we welcome a panel of folks who have been involved specifically in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh in the Early Childhood Development Working Group, which Shreya mentioned earlier. And I'm going to invite them all to come on screen so that we can start our panel, because what we want to do is talk through really what it's like to implement this systems-based approach and integrate it with the community needs and the community engagement that we all recognize is really important, but it's very difficult sometimes to kind of see the bridge between those. So if everyone is on, I'm going to ask folks to start by introducing themselves before we get into some questions. Talat, I see you first on my screen.
Okay. Thank you, Emily, for a nice presentation. This is Talat Mahmood. I'm the Senior Director of Sesame Workshop based in Bangladesh and overseeing our humanitarian portfolio in Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thanks, Talat. I see you, Raman.
Hi everyone, this is Rahman. So I'm working with the Planning International as the ECCD specialist, and I'm also the ECCD working group co-chair. So from 2020 till now, I'm the ECCD working group co-chair, and I'm leading the ECCD working group basically. Yeah, thank you very much.
Great.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kuri Chisim. I'm working at BRAC, Institute of Educational Development, as Senior Program Specialist, and I'm working in the Rohingya context in Play to Learn project.
And Rashid?
Hello everyone, good afternoon from Bangladesh. This is Rashid. I'm with International Rescue Committee, IRC. I am the technical manager for the ECD program here in Cox's Bazar. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you all so much. So this is a really exciting panel to have because this is the team that has been leading the working group in Cox's Bazar with their colleagues over the last several years and has really had, I think, some of the best and most insightful experience of any of the contexts in which we've worked. And I'm excited to talk to them a little bit more about how that has gone. One thing that I want to point out before we start, which I think is a really important testament to the success of this, is that as we heard earlier from Shreya, there are 20-something working groups. There were a number of different working groups all across Cox's Bazar. And last year, as resources were getting smaller and smaller to address the response there, the UN system started cutting and taking away some of those and rationalizing what they said, a number of those working groups. And there were just a few that were on the list for rationalization that actually remains. And the ECD working group was one of those because they had demonstrated such an incredible value, and there was so much need for the continued coordination that was happening there. So I think that's both congratulations to the team here and a testament to what this type of work, if it is well done, can add even in resource-constrained environments, and perhaps especially in resource-constrained environments. So let me start here with a couple of questions. We'll give like one to each panelist, then we'll get into some that are probably would be very interesting to hear from everyone on. But Raman, you've been involved in this for quite a long time. And I would love it if you could tell us a little bit about how the working group was formed, what were some of the original goals of it, and who it is that you've brought together to accomplish the things you have.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Emily, for the good questions. So the great opportunity for me to share some of the experience. Yeah, so the Cox's Bazar. Okay. You know the already the huge influx in the Cox's Bazar, and when influx started, then some of the organizations have been implementing the ACCD program. You have observed the field that some of the organizations they implemented ACCD program, but in the name of the ACCD, not in the fully the ACCD program. Yeah, so we found the just huge gaps, just a common understanding of the ACCD, and like the lack of the access in the ACCD, no common learning materials, play materials for the learners, no common curriculums, common curriculums or learning framework for the ECCD. That's why different organizations they implemented ECCD by different way. Yeah, and also the facilitator issues, the like the qualities of the facilitators. We find that, and also you mentioned in the earlier presentation the community engagement. The community perception is very I'll just say ECCD is not the important thing. That's the play. As a play is not the essential for our children. Yeah, and we found the gender discrimination as the huge gender discrimination in the humanitarian areas. And also, that's the one concern is the education sector that have started the education program from the age group as 5 years to 14 years. What about the others ECCD group? That's the one of the concern that education sector that time did not prioritize the age group. Yeah, that's why who are implemented the ECCD program, we sit together and we decided to just formulated the one ECCD working group along with under the education sector. That we propose the education sector. So we need just formulated one ECCD working group along with the other subsector. The ECCD, the integrated support is essential. That's why child protection subsector, nutrition sector, health sector, and they are also the ECCD working group member. Yeah. So in this connection, we formulated ECCD working group 2020. Yeah. So our ECCD working group member was the national organization, international organization, UN agencies, and as well as the other sector also. Yeah. So each organization nominated two ECCD expert as a member of the ECCD working groups. That time was 15, around the 15 working group, just the members who are just working together just for the ECCD issues and developing some of the milestone achievement. And the how is the leadership process. Just the two co-chairs just elected by the ACCD working group members. It's a direct voting. So the one co-chair is international organization from international organization, and one co-chair for the national organization. Yeah. So they are mainly leading the ACCD coordination. Yeah, also leading the ACCD working groups. And all ECCD working group members is sit together and develop the DIP, the detailed implementation plan. What's our goal? Because I also shared the huge gaps in the ECCD and how we minimize the ECCD gaps. Yeah, and then we decided the coordination mechanism. So ECCD just a working group seated together as monthly as a coordination meeting, and also we organize the ad hoc meeting when needed. Yeah. So in such way, we organize, we communicated the ICCD working groups. Yeah. And I also just mention the gaps. Yeah. Based on the gaps, we developed the DIP. Yeah. So in the DIP, so we just day by day we developed some of the minimize the gaps. Now I already mentioned we have known the common curriculum and common framework. So our first priority was that we developed the common curriculum. And, Alhamdulillah, successfully we developed the learning competency framework, and parallelly we developed the SOP, standard operational procedure aligned with the INE minimum standard. So that's why quality implementation is very important. And that's and also the we develop the parental engagement guideline. Already I shared that the parents is more important for the child development areas. Yeah. So we develop such a kind of parental engagement guideline, parenting manual, and this other thing. And also we develop the monitoring framework. The monitoring framework is an important issue. Is how quality measurement is the monitoring, and we can support from the other organizations who are the monitoring M&E expert. We are not the M&E expert. Yeah. So and the different time when we develop the different just the manual or different guideline, we're searching the just the expertise who are expert in the other organization along with the ACCD working group member. And in such way, we developed different type of modules, manual, and guideline, and along with we have the global connection, with the global expertise. We reviewed all the documents in the global expertise there. Yeah. So and that we established the online resource hub. Just along with the education sector have a Google Drive. So we developed the online resource pool, all kind of materials. Yeah.
Yeah.
Developed by ECCD working group or developed by ECCD partners. Yeah. So all the materials there and all the evidence. So we yearly we organize the evidence sharing workshop. So as a advocacy part of issues, we need the evidence. What is the good practices? What is the lesson learned? Yeah, and the success story. Yeah. So in such way, we are just working together, and know that we have a great success in the Cox's Plaza right now. Is the one of success that the that time, I already mentioned the education sector GRP, ECCD S4 is not the priority. Right now is a ECCD working group 3 to 5 years. From the 3 years, now is the education S4. Yeah, education sector S4. That's the very important thing. And also, the other sector, child protection subsector implementing the ECCD program, and also, the nutrition subsector. They are also developed the ECCD corner at their counseling center. That is I think this is all of the success, together work. Yeah.
That's so helpful.
So,
Thank you
yeah.
so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
That's great. And I heard a couple of things that I think are really important to kind of pull out of there a little bit. One is obviously coming to a common understanding of what early childhood development is, both within the working group itself, and then sort of sharing that common understanding across to other actors who aren't as familiar with it, because we all do have very different definitions and approaches to it. And the working group has definitely developed a ton of resources that were referenced here that I think could be helpful for others that are considering this. I think the other thing that's really important that I don't want to get lost is something very simple, which is the leadership of the working group, where there is a requirement for both a local NGO and an international NGO. I know that there are very specific challenges in looking at refugee-led organizations in Cox's Bazar in particular, but potentially in another context, you could add a third co-lead from a refugee-led organization to make sure that there is that kind of spread of approaches and voices perspective. And I think that the approach that's been taken in Bangladesh so far has been really helpful. So we've got a lot of great accomplishments, but I want to turn to Talat, who has been engaged there for several years. And I know Jean, who's in chatting, has also been part of this. So thanks for joining us again. But Talat, I am hoping you can tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that the group has encountered, in overcoming collectively, as well as thinking about things like how to operate within systems that don't think across topics and donor alignments. Can you tell us a little bit, about some of those and how the existing structures have made things potentially more challenging?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Emily. And thanks to Raman Bhai for kind of setting the stage, giving the introductory history and how we came where we are today. Just give a little bit of background of Cox's Bazar situation. This refugee is one of the largest refugee situation, but the Cox's Bazar context is different because the government is very supportive to manage the refugee situation, but providing the services, there are restrictions because this 1 million is still not allowed to call refugee. They're named differently. So that that created restriction of some of the services. So ECD was not, and is not a basic essential service that government acknowledge. So that is the first challenge that we have been facing since the beginning. So convincing government that ECD is essential, ECD is necessary, and ECD, so they approved the ECD service delivery, so that we can really create a vibrant group, which is now, it is called ECD working group. So that was initial challenge that we jointly worked together to establish the group. Then definitely our vision was to establish a multi-sectoral platform, multi-sectoral network of early childhood development agencies, sectors, and providers. That was initial our initial objective and goal. So then the operational challenge was it has to host by one sector. So then education, it was hosted by education sector under education sector platform. So the challenge was like creating ownership of, once it is under education, creating ownership of other sectors, complete ownership. There was representation, there was attendance in the meetings, but really creating ownership of the other sectors like child protection subsector or health and nutrition sectors. So that was a challenge, and that is still a challenge. So how then we, at some point we are thinking our particular long-term vision was, if we can establish a subsector, ECD subsector like child protection subsector, and then it is run by independent under the coordination mechanism, not under any sector. So that might be a kind of way out from the challenge we faced. So that was the other challenge that still we are kind of, it is in our process of mitigating the challenge. And ECD as a priority service, because this still under in our thinking, it is health and nutrition, child protection, and education. So three facing ECD: education facing ECD, health and nutrition facing ECD. So prioritization is one issue. Health and nutrition, by its kind of necessity from the beginning, food and health and protection, these are the priority services. Only left education. So education facing ECD, which is kind of readiness to school, readiness to for the formal education, that is kind of behind than other two sectoral intervention, which is more looked at as a priority. So that is another challenge we are facing. And then moving the transition, we face the transition like it is now a protracted phase of humanitarian crisis. So during from last year, the whole sector coordination mechanism was reviewed, reformed for rationalizing the whole coordination structure for the longer term crisis. So that created added another challenge to us, that okay, all the subgroups will be ad hoc. When it is required, it will be formed. So with our collective work and advocacy, we were successful to get approval of the ECD working group under education, with the caveat, with the declaration from the ICG. ICG is the top body of this coordination, intersectoral coordination group. So that was this ECD will be only focused, as it is education under education. So this ECD working group will be focused only on education and learning. So now, even today we had the education sector monthly meeting. So a lot of discussion we had, that now it is kind of coming down our vision and objective and goal, and then scope of work, reduce the scope of work to make it more education facing ECD. So now deciding on whether we call ECD working group or straightforward ECE working group. So these are the present challenge we are having. And that has also an alignment issue with donors. Like ECW, ECW is the largest, biggest donor in humanitarian crisis in education and early childhood development, particularly education facing. And they call it ECE, not ECD. And we had discussion on that. They don't, they acknowledge the importance of ECD, but because of their focus, they kind of deliberately focus on ECE, early childhood education, because of their scope of work and objectives. So whether we need to align our working group with the donor, major donors, terminologies and objectives, that is another kind of challenge we are facing. We will be deciding in next 2-3 months. Another challenge like the success we made that around 30-35 organizations are very vibrant and active in ECD working group. So we had several elections, and from the beginning, UNICEF, Plan International, and then BRAC, these three organizations were elected co-chairs of the to run the ECD working group. Now issue that next election is very soon, next month probably. So who will be the next leader? We are struggling to see, particularly national. There are international and even there are organizations to compete. But from the national NGO, probably we need to, from the working group and major donors, we need to focus on developing the ECD leadership. That is one focus we need to have, and that is an area of challenge. Because the national NGOs here in Bangladesh, the national NGOs, huge national NGO group, but they're mostly focused on implementation, but not having a technical leadership, technical expertise to lead the sector. So that is the challenge, and that we need to collectively think and overcome that.
That makes a lot of sense. Excellent. Sorry, did you have one more, Talat?
I think I have done.
Okay. Well, I think that's a really good couple of notes to end on. In like, it's great to start with local leadership, but how is it that we can make sure that that is sustained over time and expanded, especially as you make the really important transition, as you mentioned, into protracted crises when a lot of the international organizations start pulling back out. So making sure that there is that sort of core local appetite and capacity to sustain it. I think the other couple of points that were really important here actually align with some of the questions that are coming up in the chat. It's very clear that there's a challenge of fitting this systemic, holistic approach into a system that is organized by sectors. And that is a challenge in the way that entities think of themselves. It's a challenge in how donors align their funding and think about it. And really in the ownership piece of it too, that you mentioned about how do we get other sectors to think about it once we set it under a particular sector. And I think that some of the answer actually lies in the question that it is that Suzanne points out, which is looking at some of the M&E indicators, because one of the ways that you get people to pay attention and to do things in a way that crosses boundaries is to require that as part of the funding piece, as part of the performance measurement. If we start shifting the expectations that we have from deliver, this many jerry cans to make sure, how is it that you are engaging community support or bringing nutrition into prenatal visits? That's where we start to see it, where we're actually measuring those pieces. So I think that is one small part of the answer. But I want to turn now to Corey, because you have, with BRAC, done some really great work in helping us bridge some of these challenges of more formal coordination within the existing system, but with the really important engagement of communities and with the family members in those communities. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about that. And I saw in the chat, there's a question from Don about the way that we engage in particular with children and families with disabilities. So if you could kind of to speak to those, I'll wrap some of the Q&A into the question right here to begin with.
Thank you so much, Emily. BRAC from the very beginning had been working in the humanitarian context and also is a big supporter of the working group, and BRAC also co-chairs. So when we were working around this systemic approach, we saw that this mapping has enabled a lot of programming and a lot of organizations to understand the deeper level of how the system works, and then who are the people that are excluded and how we can include them. And the best thing is that whenever anybody is working for the children or for the community, it is absolutely crucial that we include the families and the communities in any kind of program designing or any kind of intervention designing. And system mapping or system thinking approach actually enables that, which is great. So from BRAC's perspective, And what BRAC practices and believes at the core is that co-creation is the key of anything. So whenever we're designing any kind of program or any kind of intervention or what needs to be designed, we engage with the community. We try to understand what is the need of the community and how we could be their partner in developing something which would be helpful and sustainable for them and also meaningful for the community. And since you have asked about the caregivers program, what we did is that we have had opportunity to work with the Rohingya parents of 0 to 3 years old children, both mothers and the fathers. So we do have father's engagement model and 0 to 3-year-old mother-child died. So when we were developing these programs, we put their culture at the core of it, their own practices at the core of it. We try to understand that what are the customs and what are the usual practices of the Rohingya parents and what are the positive practices that needs to be incorporated in the program and what is the decision that the people of the community are taking, that what do they want there and what they do not want. So these are all actually comes together. And then since there's a question about parents who have children with disability, we do have a psychosocial intervention because we know that, especially if you know Bangladeshi or subcontinental culture, often parents with the children who have disability, often they have tendency to blame themselves. This is a cultural thing. But then again, we do have our psychologists in field, and then we do have frontline workers who are there to provide them psychosocial supports. And we do have the, we are partner with the other agencies who are providing support and care for this kind of children and the parents. So this is how we are actually addressing this. But in order to make anything meaningful and sustainable, it is absolutely key that we do go for co-creation and we work with the communities.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And I want to keep going on that theme in coming with Rashid now, who has really played a couple of different roles, both in his work with IRC and as a Knowledge Fellow for ACDAN. And I know that you've done some more specific work on bringing in parent voices. And if you could talk to us maybe a little bit more, both about how you bring in those voices and then what you've done to incorporate what you hear, would be great to kind of tag team here in this piece.
Yep. Thanks, Emily. Yeah, I got that opportunity to work with Egdan on the Knowledge Fellowship, and it enables me to see the challenges and the difficulties the parents are having to facilitate their child development. And as a technical manager working with IRC in Cox's Bazar, I got that opportunity to interact with the beneficiaries in the camps. So yeah, that was there are a few interesting findings I got from my studies. For example, in the previous discussions, as Talat Bhai Kuriappa already have said, that there are some restrictions in the camps from the government. They can't actually go outside of the camp. They can't have any formal livelihood opportunities. Children, they don't have any formal education, can't engage in formal education system. So there are lots of challenges and barriers for parents to facilitate their child development, and that affects the children's well-being and the holistic development. And we are talking about the system thinking, right? So system thinking approach also discusses about the whole system, the holistic system. So not isolated issues, to address any isolated issues doesn't, solve the problem or helps that much for the to the parents. Yes, there are examples of ECD interventions in the camps, For example, as BRAC is doing HPL model, there are further engagements, some programs, as Talat Bhai has already mentioned, about different isolated programs like health programs, nutrition programs. They have they are supporting children in the camps, but it's a very organizational level implementations, donor focused implementations, not in a holistic way. For example, if I say the child development, it's actually in a holistic way. If we see that they need health support, they need nutrition support, they also need the school readiness and the learning support, right? So uh, this holistic approach is missing somehow. So there, we need to focus on that as well. So in my study, I try to find out these issues, and as a recommendation, I also said about the creating evidences. I know there are reports from different organizations and end line, baseline, those sort of reports we have, but this is not reflecting the holistic scenario in the camps. So as we have now, fortunately, we have a working group here, and this is very active working group here. As Roman Bhai also already mentioned, a lot of things working group is doing right now. So yeah, I think involvement of the a working group to create more evidences to advocate for parents and the child development issues, that is very necessary and important to look into or look onwards. Uh, and also uh, uh, and also the funding issues. I know the evidence is needed for advocacy, but um, if we think again about the system thinking approach, that all the components in the systems are interrelated. So any component is affected, the whole system gets affected, right? So if the organizations, they are providing support to the child and the parents, it depends on how much funds are available from in this context. And now the funding, in my study, I showed that the funding is shrinking. Even there are fund cuts from the World Food Program as well. So there are lots of barriers of creating for that. So this gap also impacts on the health program, on the nutrition program, even in the education program. So children are not getting the adequate nutrition. The parents are not getting the health supports. There are lack of parental education and father engagement. There is a huge gap. This is a cultural thing. There is a huge gap in father engagement. If we need to address these gaps, we need to work in an integrated way, and not developing the project proposals in point of view, in the donor's point of view, but we also need to figure out how we can incorporate the parents' voice, and how we can design our programs integrated way that reflects the needs from the parents. And there was discussion going on in the previous discussion, that there is some gender discrimination here. So in the Rohingya culture, this is a huge thing, that male personnel in the household, so they are the dominant ones. So they, whatever they says, this is the decision for the whole family. But they are rarely engaged with the child development process and supporting mothers. So this is another thing that we need to consider about how we can engage father group and make them understand that they also are a mandatory part for their child's development. So there are lots of things going on here, but if I say two key recommendation from my study, I would say first to emphasize on holistic approach, the integrated approach, where mother, father, and family members and others organizations, they will work collaboratively for the single child so that the child get the holistic support. And the second one, uh, besides of the organizational level or project level reports and evidence, we also need to think about a larger level evidence generation for the world to know that yes, there is need for this huge amount of people in the camps. So yeah, there's thing I can share with you right now. Emily.
Great, thank you so much. And I think that you've done a great job summarizing it. And there's one other piece I just want to pull out of that. We're thinking about these macro level systems, but what you raised is some of the long-standing cultural systems that are resulting in different gender roles and how that impacts children. And that's like a whole nother loop of early childhood development and familial relationships that we haven't considered at all, but I think is a really important part of taking a systems-based approach to thinking about why early childhood development isn't necessarily working the way that is most beneficial to children. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I think that we have answered a lot of the questions in the chat. I've been trying to build them into the questions. But one of these is about, dispersing funding through a multi-sectoral mechanism, and how that's working, especially when we know that some of the services are so structured in the way that they're delivered. And I think I'm going to take this as an opportunity to bring out my last question, which is, what is a way that the international community and some of the international networks could support this type of work at the country level? And I'm going to start with an answer of my own, which is, I think globally, those of us who've had the opportunity to work in a number of different contexts should be taking that experience and working together with donors to figure out how to provide and deliver funding in a way that allows implementers to actually do it in a more coordinated way. So I think that's a responsibility of folks who are not directly implementing programs, who have way more than enough to do. And I'm going to take that as an answer, but I want to start with Kuri on any recommendations that you have for how you think the rest of the ECD networks and others would be more supportive of the work that you have.
Yeah, sure, Emily. So there needs to be opportunities for working together, and there needs to be more opportunities for partnership as well. So all the great work this working group has done in the Cox's Bazar area needs to be heard globally, because comparatively, if you think about this working group, this is relatively very new, but then again, a lot of work had been done, and this work had been passed down to the Rohingya community and for the children as well. So this is something that we need to use the global platform to make this heard, so that people listens to them, people understands them, and there has to be more and more collaboration, and partnerships would be great. Thank you.
Well, I don't know that there's a better way to end the whole panel than on that answer. So I'm going to turn it back over to Shreya. Thank you all so much for the insights, and we'll be providing all the resources in the emails that will follow up here. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so very much, Emily, for your wonderful facilitation. And thank you so much to all our wonderful panel members for all your great insights. That was extremely engaging and helpful. And with that, I think building on Emily's last question around how global networks can come together, I'm going to pass it on to Maria from INEE and Trisha from MMA to speak a little bit more about how networks have been thinking about coordinating both at global, regional, local levels to improve humanitarian action. So Maria and Trisha, over to you.
Thank you, Shreya, and thank you to the panel. It was a great discussion. Hard to follow up that discussion. As Shreya mentioned, my name is Maria Benavides, joining from Colombia. I'm here on behalf of the Early Childhood Development Working Group of the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies, or INE. For those who may not be that familiar with INE, we are a global open network of more than 20,000 individual members and 140 partner organizations coming from around 190 countries. Our members work together to ensure the right to a quality, safe, and relevant education for all who live in emergency and crisis contexts through prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. Within the network, we have different spaces, the Early Childhood Development Working Group being one of those. Currently, we have 22 members representing 12 different countries from North America, Latin America, East and West Africa, Europe, South Asia, and the Middle East. Members represent a range of organizations, international NGOs, research organizations, and UN agencies. And we aim to support the improvement of outcomes for young children affected by humanitarian and fragile settings by providing strategic guidance, evidence, and promising practices to strengthen programs, practices, and policies. With that bit of background, we also acknowledge that several key trends continue to shape the humanitarian landscape, including more frequent and severe climate shocks, the rise in more protracted conflicts and violence, and the intensified poverty and inequality. All of these affect young children disproportionately, and which presents more complex challenges as we've been discussing. Responding to these key drivers of needs, there are several key actors, including global networks and communities that focus on early childhood development, all with different roles and strengths, such as the ones represented here, EGDAN, the Moving Minds Alliance, and INE's ECT Working Group, and others that bring together governments, civil society, academia, and individuals at national and regional levels. Through different strategic planning processes, including developing briefs, workshops, and different discussions, we have reassured the need to foster stronger coordination among these key players. Not to say that we're not doing that. We've been doing that in the past, collaborating in a more organic and sort of ad hoc way to increase reach and leverage our own strengths. We've had successful webinars, calls to actions, events, or sessions within high-level events and other initiatives. However, we now need a more intentional and systematic approach to collaboration and coordination that will lead us to complementing each other's efforts while avoiding repetition. This means identifying clear and unique contributions we each can offer to reinforce technical guidance and advocacy consistently. And with that, I'll pass it to Trisha.
Thank you, Maria. So yes, I mean, networks are ideally placed to strengthen systems. We represent constellations of actors, not stars, and we can enable the strengthening and the flow of financial and non-financial resources through facilitating knowledge sharing and learning, as well as funds across systems. And the networks are well placed to build the resilience of actors, including community-based organizations and refugee-led organizations. And we can create this connection across geographical and sectoral boundaries. We offer spaces for collaboration and convening, and this enables the creation of trust, and that we can create the connective tissue that enables more effective collaboration. This enhances coordination, strengthens relationships, and really enables us to leverage that interdependency that we all have, whether we sort of recognize it or not. So it enables us to be more purposeful about how we use this interdependency to strengthen and leverage changes in the system. Networks are really well placed to support horizontal coordination across complex fields with multiple actors, but also critically thinking today what we've heard to facilitate vertical connections from the local to global actors. And this is something that Moving Minds Alliance and others are increasingly very, very focused on and committed to. How do we get the local voices as part of our networks, providing access to some of these global, power brokers and, enabling that direct influence and engagement. And one of our key priorities, as Maria has just said, is to clarify our relationships with global networks such as ECDAN and INEE, and also the regional networks. The regional networks are a critical part of this sort of connective tissue and glue, and we want to collaborate to maximize our collaborative impact, and we are actively working to establish a clearly defined joint agenda for early childhood development in emergencies. And we believe that when we can clearly articulate this agenda, it will give us the power to engage, direct attention, and mobilize more actors to prioritize this critical issue. And so working together with all of the ECD networks, regional, local, and international, we can support each other and use our collective voice. We, as I've said, we need to work in partnership with local stakeholders and highlight their invaluable contribution to early childhood development and emergencies. Kuri, I hear you. We want the local actors here as part of MMA, as part of our, advocacy work to convey these powerful and compelling stories, so that we can showcase what local actors are achieving and the impact of their work, and work collaboratively with you and others to advocate for increased resources and support. We believe that by leveraging our individual strengths and avoiding our duplication, we create a more cohesive and effective ecosystem for supporting young children and caregivers in crisis situations, and that collectively we will all contribute to a more just and equal world where these children are no longer left behind, but can access the support and resources they need, not just to survive, but to thrive. Shreya, I think it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Maria and Trisha, for your brief but very powerful comments. I think with that, we just about have a minute left. I don't know if we have any other questions. I do see one question in the chat, and I don't know if we can get to it really quickly about how the experience of disbursing funding through multi-sectoral mechanisms where typically services are organized sectorally. I don't know if any of the ECD working group members wanted to quickly comment on that. To answer that, maybe in a quick 30 seconds to 1 minute. Kuri, Abdur, if you have any quick reactions? Kuri, I see you came in. I don't know if you wanted to react to that question.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much.
I think Roman
Yeah,
would be the best person to respond.
Yeah. So also you can share. Yeah. Yeah. So you already know that the funding. Yeah, the funding is sinking. So we need a collaborative funding. As if we work together, right? The coordination is important. There's the every subsector or sector, they're working differently. If we just work together, we developed just a strategy for the common funding for the use of the this organization, that would be helpful. Otherwise, they are just collecting the fund differently and they are implementing the different ways. So we need to just a collaborative, just a common understanding, and develop the strategy to just submitting the project, the collaboratively with the donors, and it would be the very effective. And I think it would be the less funding, and will just reach the more children and reach the more quality and as quality as well. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that quick response, Abdur, and thank you so much, everybody, for being here right on time. Thank you to all our great panelists for your presentations and everyone for joining us and your feedback. Please do watch out for an email soon after in the next day with the recording and all the resources, presentations, contact details, and everything you'll need as a follow-up from the webinar. But thank you so much for being here and have a great evening, a great rest of your day, wherever you are. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining.